Good morning, DJ and PK. It's 97.5 The Zone. Welcome in on a Wednesday morning. We begin with the NBA playoffs. Wow. Cleveland and Dallas have got to get it going. They looked bad in game one of their respective playoff series. Cleveland did not win a single quarter and got thumped in Boston, and Dallas got soundly beaten in Oklahoma City. Now, it's just one game. It's a long series. They have time to bounce back, but they really have to bounce back. Neither one of those teams was that close to winning that game. So, got to do better. We're going to pivot right now, though, from the NBA to the NHL, the draft lottery. Utah's going to draft sixth. No real surprise there. Well, I shouldn't say they're going to draft sixth. They were, the lottery put them in the sixth slot. Bill Armstrong, the general manager, says that with 13 picks in 7 rounds, they might package some of those picks together and try to move up. So we'll see if they want to move up to, 3 or 4. If there's somebody they really like, they think they can get them. And if somebody wants to make that move. We'll see what kind of wheeling and dealing Bill Armstrong does. Here is the general manager of the new Utah NHL team, Bill Armstrong, after the NHL draft lottery.
Hey, Bill, Kyle of KSLSports.com. Now that you know that you have the 6th pick, how does that adjust your planning? You see the 5 teams in front of you. You kind of had those odds already, but how does that change your planning now that you know who's ahead of you, if you want to move up, down, all of those types of things, as well as staying at 6?
Yeah, you get excited because now you know exactly where you're picking. So you're kind of now it's going to the scouting meetings and honing in on the players that we like at 6. So it's really now just targeting your guys. It's an exciting time of year. Just you've kind of figured out. You've all year you've battled and gone to war with your scouts going across the world. Working every single night in every hockey rink across North America and Europe and. Now it's at the point where they're making decisions, and now we're making decisions on who we're going to take at 6. So this is a great time of the year for us as an organization to get together and go through the scouting meetings, go through the combines, and then we end up in Vegas, and it's going to be they've got a lot of talented players up top in the draft, and we got a chance to get one of them.
Ryan Miller, go ahead and ask your question.
Hey, Bill, Ryan Miller from KSL.com. I'm just curious, what are your general thoughts on the prospects that will be there around 6?
Yeah, I mean, every draft is different. It's kind of interesting. When I was with St. Louis, and we're always picking around 20 to 26, and we're in the same spot every year, and we kind of honed in on that area. Now that we've been going to the rebuild, we've been picking, basically 3 to 6. So we're in that range, and I think the more you pick there, the better you get there. I do believe that, and I think there's a good talent level there. There's they're young men that are 18, and some of them are still. Late developers, and you can just see glimpses of who they're going to be. But there's some good talent there. There's some good defensive talent. There's some good offensive players that are there. I like this year's draft, and I know our scouts are excited about where we're picking and the opportunity to pick some of that talent.
They catch.
Bill, J. Catch from KSL Sports. Just wanted to ask you about the process of evaluating talent. Is this a year-long effort that now kind of like you hone in on guys you may have been evaluating maybe for years at this point?
Yeah, it's a whole process, when you go through this, because it starts the year before when they're 17, they're underages. And you watch them, and then the summer goes by. You watch them in the summer tournaments, and then you see them with their team. You see them on the All-Star teams or the prospect teams. Then they go back with their team, and they end up going into playoffs, and some end up going into the U18. So you see them all over the world in these different events. And there's a lot of guys that they at the start of the year they're just okay. But then they, in their draft year, it's almost like they become men and they shoot up. And good scouts keep an eye and they keep an open mind as the player moves through it. And sometimes there's even players, that we see it all the time where, the media hypes them at the start of the year and keeps them there. But for our staff, with our experience, sometimes we're not afraid to, as we did last year, to go out and look at different options. And people are like, hey, I can't believe they're picking those guys. But what they don't understand is, 3 years from now, they always turn to us and go, yeah, you got the right guy. So it's a process. You got to have a lot of trust in your scouts, and we have a tremendous amount of experience on our staff, and they've done a good job for our team that's going through the rebuild and being able to add talent. But it is certainly a process that it's a full year of scouting to get to understand the whole player.
Ryan McDonald.
Hey, Bill. Ryan McDonald from Deseret News. Has the preparation process been different with the relocation? How's that affected things, if at all? What's that been like adding to the normal evaluation and scouting process?
Our process has stayed the same. I think the thing that's changed, where our scouts are really excited, is they're excited about coming into Salt Lake, seeing the city and getting the vibe of the excitement in this city. And I think that's going to help us as we go through the process. We have our scouting meetings here. The scouts are just pumped to get in and see the building and the dressing room being worked on. And so I think it's going to be a lot of good energy. And our scouts get to see the new city we're playing out of, and the people in Salt Lake and all the people in the state have been just so excited about us coming. Every time we land here, you get a smile on your face because people are just ecstatic about having an NHL team in Salt Lake.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, Bill, I'm curious, how do assets play into the draft? Like, how can you use those to move up, go down? I don't know. What's kind of the process of using those?
Well, I think, you see teams move down and acquire picks to move backwards. And sometimes you use picks. We've used our picks in the past for the geeky pick, where we've bundled a tremendous amount of picks together to move up in the draft. And the team that's pick starved, that maybe it's just started their rebuild, they like that because they're going to get a handful of picks instead of just having one. So we always try and look at every single option, where we can move up to. Can we move back and get the same player, gain assets? It's a whole strategy in itself, and it consumes you, the week of the draft. We'll talk about some ideas as we move through the process, but the week of the draft, it just consumes you. It's almost like you're not human, because you only have one thought, just the entire week is just draft, and it's on. And sometimes there's opportunities to move up, and sometimes there's opportunities to move back. But it comes down to, no matter where you move, you got to get the right player. At the end of the day, you got to get the right player. And sometimes, a lot of the conversations just say, hey, stay and we've earned the right to pick here. Let's swing from here. So that conversation has a lot, but I can tell you, we talk about it 24/7 in that week. It's crazy how much it consumes us about all the different things that can happen at the draft.
Bill, wanted to ask you, just with guards, a lot of us have an NBA background with the Utah Jazz, and they traditionally bring in a number of prospects for visits ahead of the draft. How does that work in the NHL, and how will it affect you guys not necessarily having a home sheet to have guys maybe be evaluated on right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. The difference is you can bring players in for workouts in the NBA. The difference between the NHL and NBA is once they're booked in for the NHL Combine, you're not allowed to test them. They're locked in to do the testing at the Combine. Anybody else that wasn't invited, you can bring them into your Combine, and we do that. We're set up with all our metrics and everything that we're doing, and we'll probably do that out of Arizona this year just because we're set up in the rinks there. But we'll move it here next year. And that's an important process to know more about the back end of the draft. And like I always say, you never beat the NHL by 7 goals. You might beat them by just 1 goal and one step ahead of them. And if you can find that out in your Combine, or you can find that out through data, or more information, you're always digging. You're always, a hungry staff is the best staff, and the staff with knowledge is good. And I like our process that our guys use, and we work on it every day.
Bill, you've talked about how you believe that, you build the core of your team through the draft and supplement with all the other avenues. When you look at the amount of picks you have, not only this year, but also in the next few seasons, does that like impact how you look at this year's draft? Do you look at it in a vacuum, or do you plan like, hey, this year's draft plus next year's draft before you try and make those moves where you strike while the iron's hot, so to speak?
Yeah, you look at really what you can get at the end of the day. Can you bundle all your picks and move up and get one guy? Or, can you just use your picks to take swings at, 4 or 5 guys? Can you use your picks to go out and buy a player? There's so many different options for us. We go in so many different ways. We try not to look at, hey, we got so many picks the following year and the following year. It's year by year and value those picks. Even though you might have 3 second rounders, value them and make sure you're not giving them away or thinking somewhat of hey, it doesn't matter. We got a ton of these picks. We value all our picks, and we try to be as stingy as we can with our picks and make smart decisions to acquire players or to move up. But it does give us a lot of options in the draft. And I think that's the power of having so many picks is that, if you want to bundle them together from this year or even some next year to move up the ladder to get your guy, you can.
Ryan, go ahead.
Bill, are there any guys, and maybe what's the approach in terms of guys who might be able to come in right away? Does it change from year to year, or is it kind of you think maybe a couple guys might, but most won't? What's the philosophy there of guys who might be able to come in and play right away?
Yeah, I think when you're normally in an NHL draft, I think the top 3 always have a chance to come in and play. It's also situational. It's also how good your team is. Like, the one year we had Dylan Guenther who played for us for a small period of the season, but we weren't as deep on our team. Now our team is added more depth and more scoring. So it's harder to make our team. So sometimes it's just easier to send them back to junior, let them play it out there and work their way up eventually. But it really depends on what your team is like. There's some teams, obviously, if you're picking as one of the top picks, your team's not that good. So there's a good chance that one of the 3 or one of the 5 and the top of the draft can come in and play and have impact for you. But they're still young men. And when they sit in front of you in the office, you realize how young they are. But there's usually a good chunk, maybe 3 to 5 that can usually play the first year.
Okay, Andrea, go ahead. Probably our last question here.
I was just curious your initial reaction to seeing 6. I mean, there was a lot of talk that it could be higher, it could be, and when you do see 6, you can only control what you can control, but just your initial reaction to knowing that you officially are in that spot.
Well, I think every organization dreams of moving up and picking at 1, right? So we're all very hopeful that lottery ball's going to bounce our way, and then reality sits in and they flip the card and you're like, oh, okay, well, we didn't move back. Let's pick at 6. We're going to get a real good player. We're picking in the top 10. This is where we're supposed to be. And here we go. So, yeah, I think you always dream. Our 2 head scouts, Ryan and Darryl, like to pick at 1 because it can be pretty easy for them. When you're picking at 6, there's a lot more work that goes into it, and you got to hustle and grind on it. But it's definitely reality sets in, and the good news is I tend to look at the positive eyes through it. Hey, we're picking at 6. That's where we finished, and we didn't move back.
Okay, we're going to do one more. Patrick, go ahead.
Hi, Bill. Patrick Kinahan, KSL Sports. I'm wondering how much do you balance best player available versus the specific needs for your team?
Yeah, it's a good question because it's easy when your team's not full of any players, right? And you can just pick whoever you want. I think it changes a little bit to some degree as you start to build out your team. But I've always challenged the scouts to pick the best player because if he's that good, you can always move him for who you want. In my mind, if you try and pick too much positionally, you can really go past some really great players, and then everybody will look back and go, hey, why didn't they take that guy? He got 50 goals because you were so focused on your positional play. And you just have to remember that if that guy's that good and he's going to score 60 goals or 70 goals in the National Hockey League, you're going to be able to trade him for the guy you want. So we try to stick to best player. If it's a tie, then we'll go with the position.
There's the GM of the new hockey team, Bill Armstrong. DJ and PK proudly presented by Murdoch Hyundai, Utah's #1 Hyundai dealer for 18 years in a row. When we come back, Tim LaComb is talking basketball. Next, stay with us.
97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Raleigh Jensen sitting in for DJ. He'll be back soon enough for sure. Tim LaComb coming up. Are you a business owner? You have better things to do than just job hunt or scramble to find your next great hire. No, that's a headache. Let Spirion Staffing and Recruiting do it for you. Visit us online at Spirion.com/Utah. SPHERION.com/Utah. Tim LaComb joining us. Timmy LaComb, how the heck are you?
Good morning, PK. How are you, buddy?
Yeah, great, man. Have you ever seen better defense than what the Minnesota Timberwolves are playing?
Man, it was absolutely phenomenal. The crazy energy, their length, was a huge issue. But I thought Chris Finch did something in the post game that was really it hit home. He talked about Rudy not being there, but Rudy kind of being the author of the culture of the defense there. And you don't have to look very far back. I mean, a couple of years ago, Anthony Edwards, in my mind, kind of was popping off, a little mature, made fun of Rudy Gobert when he was on the Jazz. And I think there was a period where I don't know anybody really believed that this thing could be something last year when it was difficult, but Rudy stayed with it. And I just think back all the post games that he harped on defense, here in Utah, trying to get guys to buy in. And I think he's got a whole crew of guys there that are built for that and have bought in.
How much of what is the ceiling for Anthony Edwards? I think we're all having just like a real fun time watching him grow up before our eyes, but who's a real comparison? Who's the person that you can look at and say, "Ooh, this is someone that we could probably see him looking like and playing like over the years"?
Well, I've seen a ton, and he killed the comparison last night. But on Twitter, there's a ton of people chiming in, and I have to agree. I mean, I think his excellence, is one thing, but just his physical ability. I mean, it does channel some Jordan, it does channel some Kobe. And it's crazy to me how fast the rise happened. But I think it's evident that this team's very serious. He's quick, very quick, like in postgame last night, to defer. So he's not one of those guys a la LeBron that every time he gets the mic, he has to talk about how great he is. I think it's a shift in team, and I know, Riley, you being a very, very good, sports psychologist, mental health coach, or mental training coach, you got to appreciate something like that because there's kind of a shift happening in the NBA. A little bit off of, you got to have star power, but your whole team, your depth, your guys coming off the bench have to be good. And I think that's what we're seeing with Minnesota.
Tim LaComb joining us. I'm wondering how you balance the aggressiveness of Minnesota. So you gotta match that to a good degree, but you can't get caught up in the refereeing because whatever's being done to you, you could turn around and do to them because it was clear that referees weren't going to be doing anything that wasn't this side of butchering a person. They're not really calling the fouls, but the idea. I'm a baseball guy. If it's if you call it a couple inches off the plate, well, all right, it's up to me to adjust. And how do they adjust to the physical nature? Because even though they're down 0-2 and going back to Minnesota, I don't think this thing is over. I don't really care where the game is played. It's going to be hard for them to win the series. They got to win 4 out of 5, obviously, but it's not impossible. But I just think that they've got to find a way to make adjustments and match the physicality without getting caught up in refereeing and also getting beyond what you normally do.
I think those are all great points. And just to kind of section that off a little bit, I do believe that Denver's in shock a little bit. It was only maybe 2 weeks ago that I think everybody in the basketball world was thinking, can they kind of put together a dynasty of sorts? Their world got rocked here in 2 games. And I think last night was just very, very, passionate fight from Denver, but I do think they probably crossed the line. And you got to keep all that in check. That being said, I don't know that I've ever seen a team speed them up. They have really hung their hat on spacing, playing through Jokic, letting the defense make a decision, and then they're so good to take what's given. And there's really not much out there right now because guys are being smothered. I think they're doing a great job of taking Murray away. And when you take Murray away, that Denver team becomes way less potent. They're speeding up Jokic. They're racing the ball up the floor. They're doing all those things to counter. And right now, I do believe that Denver, particularly last night, was in a state of shock. I'm with you, PK. I don't think it's like straight over because I do think there's something to be a championship team. But Denver is in a dire situation, obviously going back to Minnesota down 2-0 and really not being in either of those 2 games from the jump. So it's a crazy indication of just how fast this game can move. Going into the playoffs, everybody's talking about Jokic, and right now, I would say the talk of the town in the playoffs is Brunson, and who's leading the playoffs in scoring, and then Ant, just dominating in every facet. I think he's really kind of put his stamp on the fact that he's probably the best 2-way player we have in the league.
So what do you do if you're Denver? You're going back to Minnesota. What would be your game plan? What is it that you do to attack this Minnesota defense? I was talking earlier with PK. It feels like there's like 5 Scottie Pippens out there. I mean, they're all so long and they're so difficult to kind of get into what you want to get into. What do you do?
Length is key, and you're exactly right. I think they really put a premium on that. I mean, you see Nikhil Alexander-Walker, who I really liked here. I thought that perhaps one of the things that Quinn could have done is played him more in the stead of Royce O'Neal. Royce had this, I don't know, man, it was kind of this local geographic, he's such a great defender. But at the end of the day, he was okay. He's just the best of the perimeter defenders the Jazz had. And so I think, unfortunately, Keel didn't get a ton of time, but he's just indicative of what that team's about. They're long, they're very aggressive. What does Denver do? I think they have to do a better job of handling that. And the great teams, they don't get sped up. They play at their pace, and they use the defenders' aggression against them. The problem with Denver right now is I think they are a little. I mean, they're a little bit light in terms of the bench. They're not getting a ton of help when, say, Jokic goes down, sits down when Murray is out. So I think they have to just get back to square one, and they have to dictate tempo. As hard as that is, they have to, again, try to use that aggressiveness against Minnesota, back cuts and things like that. But it's an uphill climb because this team, I'm serious, I don't know that I've seen a team play with this much just crazy supreme effort, whether it's the starters or the bench players, they really believe right now.
Tim LaComb joining us. Tim, one of the things that has always bugged me living in this community is when a Ute goes to BYU, someone who's been working in a basketball program for University of Utah and then goes to BYU. I don't like those guys when they do it. Now, Chris Burgess has done it. What do you think about that? I mean, anybody who's ever done that, I despise that human being, Tim. Do you know if anybody else has done that?
No, I don't. I will tell you a quick story, though. When I did that, I was at the U, and I was full-fledged. My kids grew up with saying kind of limericks that I probably can't repeat on the air about BYU because I was a Utah guy. And when I got the call to go down and interview, I was not that serious about taking the job, to be honest with you. I kind of went down, and then when I got down there, I fell in love with Coach Rose, from a coaching perspective, from a mentor perspective, and the rest is history. But I will never forget the first time I put on blue. I was going to camp, and I put on some BYU shorts, and I swear to you, I was looking underneath to see if I was going to get a rash. But the bottom line is this. It really, we joke about it, but the bottom line is this. There are really great people both places.
For sure.
And there are idiots both places.
For sure.
And unfortunately, the idiots are the loudest. And so you get kind of this tainted view. But the bottom line is they're both great places to work. The rivalry is the rivalry, but you throw yourself into, the guys you're coaching and the people you're coaching with and the community, and it's pretty awesome. But really happy for Chris. Obviously made a decision based on opportunity. And I think, in the last few days, particularly just in, texting here and there with him, he's really found a great relationship in a short period of time with KY. And I think they're going to be a nice team, a nice duo. The rest of the guys down there trying to attract the best LDS guys, but also shooting for the stars, which is what they're kind of doing now. It's a weird place to be. I'll promise you that, because in my experience, I left and nobody talked to me up north for a long time. And then down here, everybody thought you were kind of like you were being embedded, as a covert op. It took me a while to get people to trust me down there. So it is a weird place to be, no doubt.
Help people to understand what Chris Burgess brings to the table, and is this a guy that's on upward bound to being a head coach someday, and why would he be a good head coach?
There's no doubt about the fact that he's going to be a head coach. I think he's just got a unique ability, both from the basketball side, but I think more importantly, he kind of approaches the game similar to like I did. I do believe, like, my premise is in everything I do, people are the secret sauce. You don't get a team in total to buy in on defense. You get a guy to, and you get another guy, and you recruit another guy, and it becomes culture. But I think what Chris ultimately brings is a love for people and ability to connect. And when you can connect with boosters, when you can connect with alumni, when you can connect with recruits, and you can build, a really supportive network, I think you're in the right direction. And I look back at what Chris has done. I've told this story a few times, but I went up to recruit Zach Celius in high school, and Chris had just gotten back from Europe. And I'll never forget, we were standing in the doorway between two gyms and asking him what he wanted to do. And he's like, I'm not sure. And I say, man, you should really coach. I think you've got the personality. I think you could really draw people to a situation authentically. And he's done that, and I think he's really kind of stood on principle that way. People are most important. And I think, if people are most important, I think you're going to be pretty successful in life.
Tim LaComb joining us. Yeah, I second that. I think Chris Burgess is an outstanding human who does make those connections. There's no doubt about it. Just spend some time with him, and you'll see that. And I haven't spent a lot of time with him, but I spent some time, a little bit, enough to know. I can't say enough good things about him. No matter where he is, he's going to do a great job. earlier this week, we saw that Smith, the outstanding, I guess you'd call him point guard for Utah, is going to go to St. John's. And it's the new world where everybody's eligible immediately. And it's funny that you've been out of coaching, 4, maybe 5 years, and the dramatic changes that have happened just in that shortest span of time. If you're Craig Smith and you turn the keys over to him offensively along with Brandon Carlson, and obviously Carlson has run out of eligibility, how frustrating is it to bring in somebody, have him play so well and be such an opportunity that you gave him the ball to basically do what he wants, and then he leaves? I mean, that's just got to be a kick in the teeth.
Yeah, it is. It has to be, and it is. Obviously, it's the way that this game's gone now. And I kind of saw that coming down the road, and as a people person, I couldn't withstand that stuff. You throw all this time and energy and support and love, and the bottom line is, he goes and chooses a school and a guy who really enjoys Italian restaurants late at night.
Ooh, I see what you've done there, buddy.
not a Patino guy at all. When you talk about character and people. But anyhow, it's worked for some to follow his example, and, some more power to them. But I think that at the end of the day, that's what would kill me. I think it would be that time and energy and kind of that camaraderie and loyalty that used to kind of identify sports, and now it's like a money grab for everybody. Every single person's kind of like, I'm here, I'm not necessarily planted in deep soil, so I can move quickly. And so I just believe at the end of the day, this thing will fade out. I just don't know over time. There can be enough generated, talking about interest and revenue to change your team every single year and hire, 8 to 10 mercenaries to come in and move your university forward. It just seems kind of hollow to me. I know in the interim it's exciting, it's fun, guys are getting money, but I just don't know it's sustainable. And I think it probably has a shelf life because ultimately people love to watch guys come in and get better.
Yeah.
To grow and see what the system can do for them. And right now you're literally renting guys for 8 months at a time.
Right, exactly. Appreciate your time, Tim. And I'm just saying, next week the weather's supposed to be better. I may have some time available in the afternoons. We'll just leave it at that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I would love to do lunch. Like an outdoor cafe? Is that kind of what you're thinking?
I wasn't talking food.
I know, I'm kidding. Riley, I didn't officially. Riley's one of the best people to ever meet. Speaking of lunch, I had a great lunch with him and Draper one afternoon and learned a ton. If you want to know more about that mental game, man, get with this dude because he's brilliant.
There you go.
Listen to that.
Yeah.
Hey, I got another lunch that's on me coming.
I only tell the truth, brother.
All right, thanks for your time, Tim.
Yeah, see you guys. Thanks, PK.
There is Tim LaComb. DJ and PK were brought to you in part by Minky Couture. Make Mother's Day easy and get the best gift ever. A blanket or a robe from Minky Couture. Mom will love it. Shop online at minkycouture.com or any Minky store. They'll even take care of the wrapping. Even better, save 50% using the promo code ZONE50. It's the best gift ever, Minky Couture. When we come back, the spring football tour continues with Tim Fitzgerald from Kansas State.
Join Jake and Ben at Destination Homes' newest community that's Trailside and Layton Friday from 10 a.m. to noon for games, snacks, giveaways, and more. 1800 West Gordon Avenue, Destination Homes. DJ and PK, DJ's out today. Riley Jensen sitting in. Okay, we're going to head out to Kansas. Tim Fitzgerald, publisher of Go PowerCat, covering Kansas State for 24/7 Sports. Tim, good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, we do this every spring, and we go around. Now we got fewer teams because we had BYU and Utah. Weren't in the same conference. They were, then they weren't. Now they are again. And so here we are. We're excited about it. I'm a Pac-12 guy. Graduated from Arizona State, but it's the reality is that the Pac-12, Pac-10, Pac-8 is gone. It's crazy to think about. So we're on to the new stuff. And Kansas State, we followed them a little bit last year with BYU being in the conference. And I think that with 15 starters returning, 40 or more, close to 50 letter winners, which I think is the most in 20 years or so, they think they had like 56 in 2021 or something like that. 8 super seniors is what I read. I believe that Kansas State will be one of the favorites. Tell us why you think that's accurate.
Well, K-State has an interesting mixture of the experience you noted with a lot of players who, played a lot of football at the Big 12 level and understand, how every week it's a battle for survival. And they mix that with some really exciting young players who might elevate K-State to even higher level, starting with quarterback Avery Johnson, who everyone is intrigued to see over the course of the season. And honestly, there's some defensive ends that were waiting in the wings on this team that could prove to be really dynamic. Some young guys playing their first year, or maybe they played enough last year to burn a year. But there's some young talent on this team out of that recruiting class from a year ago that'll be redshirt freshmen or in their second year that are just really got fans fired up. And I think the future of K-State football looks bright because of them.
We have a local guy here by the name of Kit Rawlings, one of the best running backs that ever played in the state of Utah. And he went and played at Kansas State and absolutely loved it. If I talk to Kit Rawlings, I'll get a gut full of Kansas State Wildcat stories before lunch is over.
Tell him I say hi.
I will. But obviously he was attracted there for a lot of different reasons. In this new shifting landscape, with the NIL and with everything that's going on, what sets Kansas State apart? Is it still the same things that Kit Rawlings loves? Is there a huge NIL push going on? Like how does Kansas State continue to be Kansas State in the new shifting landscape of college football?
Yeah, that's a great question because everything has radically changed. And K-State's a developmental program to the core. When you are operating in the state of Kansas with a limited number of, high school recruits coming out, certainly Division I recruits, and you also have Kansas in the state trying to do the same thing, you have to be willing to take some kids that may not be there yet, may not even get scholarship offers from FBS programs, and yet there's something about them that you sense they could be a very good player, and you put the time into them. Recent players, this is a little bit older, but Jordy Nelson was a walk-on. He didn't have an offer from anyone, and we know what he did in the NFL, and maybe the latest one to do that, he did get a scholarship from K-State at the last second, to be honest. It was Felix Anudike Uzama, who was, if you see the before and after pictures of him, you'll see why he wasn't getting any scholarship offers. And now he's been a first-round NFL draft pick. So K-State really does develop people. They invest time. And so they're bending their NIL in a different direction. They're not searching for superstars out of the NIL, out in the portal. They're trying to keep their players from transferring out for more money. Their focus is really on maintaining the core players they have on their roster and try to limit their losses. They haven't always been successful, but for the most part, they're achieving stability in an era of instability, and I think that's pretty remarkable that they've done it. And I think K-State still fosters a true family, not the word family, the actual feeling of family within its program and within the university as a whole. It's a really tight campus.
Tim Fitzgerald, who covers Kansas State, joining us on the 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Tell us about the coaching changes, because I believe there was some changes. Matt Wells there, who coached at Utah State, and I think they're moving an offensive line coach to be a play caller now. Speak to those.
Yeah, it's interesting because the guy that departed was Colin Klein, Heisman finalist, led K-State to the 2012 Big 12 championship. Everyone around here thought he was going to, stay with Kleiman until Kleiman retired and become the head coach. And he got an offer he couldn't refuse from Texas A&M, which certainly elevates his status in the coaching world. And it kind of rocked K-State for a while because he was their offensive coordinator along with quarterback coach. And they just immediately moved to Connor Riley, their offensive line coach, a long-time coach with Chris Kleiman. And I think people are interested to see what the offense looks like with an O-line guy calling plays. But they brought in Matt Wells, not just to coach quarterbacks, but to be co-offensive coordinator because he has some very interesting ideas about things K-State should be doing with its offense, and particularly Avery Johnson and now Dylan Edwards in the backfield as a new piece to go with DJ Giddens, their veteran running back. And I think we're all intrigued to see how the offense actually manifests itself over the course of a season. But I think bringing in new ideas, and Matt Wells certainly has them, has been a blessing for the program and kind of stretched the boundaries of this team a little bit that maybe they wouldn't have with Colin Klein staying.
Give me one or two players for Kansas State that BYU fans and Utah fans should look out for when it comes to the Big 12 season.
That's a really good question because there's a lot of guys speckled across this roster that are pretty notable. It's got to start quarterback Avery Johnson. He just, he went to the Elite 11, and I had one of the analysts call me and say, this is a high school kid, and these are all great football players on the bus, but Avery's holding court. Everyone's around Avery. He's just got that kind of personality. Just an incredible runner to start with, but people sleep on his passing ability, which is pretty remarkable too. So we're all very interested to see that develop. They've got a group of receivers that has been greatly upgraded over the last 2 years. But another guy in that recruiting class with Avery Johnson, Jace Brown, kind of came off the bench, pulled the red shirt off if they were going to try to do that, and came in and played midseason and really shined for K-State. Those two connected for a touchdown in the bowl game. Defensively, corner Jacob Parrish is possibly an all Big 12 level guy. Another two-star, under-recruited guy who came into K-State and played as a true freshman. So he didn't even need to develop. He just fell through the cracks of recruiting. And that's true. Austin Moore, maybe the one main linebacker, is a walk-on. And you've got another linebacker there next to him that was also hardly recruited. K-State signed him out of Topeka, Kansas, and lo and behold, he's playing at a high level. So it's just a really interesting roster. If you want to judge by star ratings, and you can see that done, K-State always is towards the bottom of the Big 12, even the new Big 12. And yet, they're usually towards the top of the standings.
I believe, 4 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, they changed to the 3-3-5 defensively. Yeah. And since then, they've only been giving up about 21.5 points a game. Why has that made such a big difference?
Yeah, going with the developmental program, a program like K-State kind of struggles to find a pair of big defensive tackles that can hold up. So they went to more of a speed lineup, accentuating the type of players they can get. They can get really good safeties and outside linebackers all day long. They put more of those on the field. It does make them a little bit light against the run. And we're going to see some four-man front this year, I think, to try to address that. Because when they went up against a really strong running team, which, let's be honest, there's not that many in the Big 12 to start with, they struggled. But when you got Ollie Gordon at Oklahoma State, who might be, a Heisman guy, you better figure out how to stop the run, or they're going to run over you all day. So that's been a weakness of K-State's defense, and they're working this offseason to try to correct that.
You've been covering Kansas State for a long time. What are your predictions for this fall? What are your thoughts? I mean, obviously there's a whole bunch of returners.
Yeah.
Do you expect them to compete for a championship?
I've been telling people I expect Utah and K-State to be in the Big 12 championship. But with that said, the history of the Big 12, and it'll be interesting to see if this holds up with the new schools coming in, because they are impactful to this conference. Honestly, probably much more than last year's four were. And you always get chaos. You always get someone picked towards the bottom that all of a sudden is forcing their way up into the top and being very competitive. Last year was West Virginia, had an impact on this race and was picked for dead last. While I say Utah and K-State, we're venturing into a great unknown how this conference will actually look and play out on the field. Maybe Utah does dominate in a way we don't expect, or maybe it just stays hyper competitive from top to bottom, and we have a really enjoyable conference race.
Tim Fitzgerald, who owns a dog and covers Kansas State for us.
If you follow my YouTube channel, they're featured quite a bit because they're in the studio with me.
That's fine. One of the things we have out here in Utah is quite common when kids decide to put their athletic careers on hold for a couple years and go serve church missions. Well, lo and behold, man, Kansas State's going to have one. That's out of the blue. Jake Clifton, linebacker, said he will pause his college football career to serve a Latter-day Saint mission. Manhattan, Kansas? I mean, what's going on there? What do you know about that one?
It's funny. Jake wasn't a Mormon when he arrived in Manhattan, so they taught him the way while he was here. So that caught the coaches a little bit off guard, to be honest. And,
I bet.
They hadn't really dealt with that, but I think now after you kind of get the shock of it, because it was something brand new that, of course, you guys experience all the time, I think people are really happy for him. I am. I mean, he knows what he wants to do in life, in terms of service. And he's going to do this right now, and I think it's the appropriate time to do this right now because he's got NFL aspirations. Guys, this was going to be the starting middle linebacker for this team. So that's been an area of concern with the transfer portal here in the spring. They found someone out of New Mexico that they like a lot. So it kind of rocked him. Jake's a guy that can play every linebacker position, and it looks like that's his spot. And he's been a really valuable piece of this team for a couple of years now. So to suddenly lose him was a little bit shocking, but from Jake's perspective, you go now. I mean, you'll have 2 more years to play football after you come back and are more of a grown man, and then maybe you can find your way to the NFL. But I'm proud of him for making a very adult decision when a lot of college athletes aren't making many adult decisions now. They're making emotional decisions.
I'm wondering if they consulted with Matt Wells a little bit. I mean, he's not a member of the faith, but obviously he dealt with it as a player at Utah State and as a coach at Utah State.
Yeah, I do wonder. I hadn't actually thought of that, but it caught him a little bit off guard. They were a little bit thin with experience at middle linebacker. They had Jake penciled in there, and lo and behold, they don't have him. So again, K-State can get outside linebackers, but that middle position has been a problem that they had overcome in the recent years because Daniel Green was there, forever. I think he was at K-State for 7 years because of all the different things going on. So this is a new thing. They had to go find a frontline middle linebacker. They thought they had it in-house. Now they had to go to the portal, which is something they don't typically have to do to fill a spot, but they did it at that spot.
Tim, we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Anytime, boys. Thank you very much.
Okay, that's Tim Fitzgerald, who covers Kansas State for 24/7 Sports and publisher of Go Power Cat.
When we come back, what is trending? The headlines are next.